AITA for not wanting to invite my sister-in-law and her family over more often. I, 35F, am married to my husband, 38M, who comes from a different country. His entire family, except for one sister, 43F, still lives in his home country. His sister, however, lives about half an hour away from our home. Naturally, because of the distance from the rest of his family, my husband is particularly close with this sister. Before we had our baby, we used to spend a significant amount of time at their house. However, everything changed when we welcomed our daughter, 7 months old, into the world late last year. Shortly after giving birth, I went through a really rough time. I developed postpartum depression and anxiety, which made those early months incredibly challenging. On top of that, I struggled with breastfeeding. It was a difficult process that often took up a huge portion of the day because our baby girl had a tongue tie issue and other related problems. This meant I had almost no time to take care of myself, let alone manage household tasks or entertain guests. My anxiety was intense, with one of my biggest fears being that the baby might get sick. This fear was likely heightened because I had experienced a miscarriage before having her, which occurred when I got severely ill during that pregnancy. Given all these challenges, the idea of hosting visitors was simply out of the question for a long time. The only person I felt comfortable having around was my mom, who would come and stay to help me out during those tough days. Fast forward to now, and the situation with my sister-in-law and her family has become a bit of a sticking point. Since our daughter was born, they've only visited us about once a month. Meanwhile, my husband, our baby, and I have visited them maybe twice as often, but even that hasn't amounted to much in total. My husband has been wanting to invite them over more frequently, but I find myself feeling quite reluctant. The reason? My sister-in-law doesn't just come over with her husband, 41M, she brings all 6 of their children. Yes, you read that right, 6 kids. While they're all wonderful and very well behaved, the reality is that having 8 people over at once can be overwhelming, especially when I'm already dealing with anxiety and depression. When they visit, it often feels like I'm hosting a major event because of the sheer number of them. It's not that I don't enjoy their company. I do. But the combination of my anxiety and my concern about germs makes these visits extremely stressful for me. Children, as sweet as they are, aren't always the most diligent about hygiene, and with my heightened fear of illness, having them around can be very triggering. Although my anxiety has improved compared to those early postpartum days, it still takes a lot out of me to be around such a large group, especially when I'm worried about my baby or myself getting sick. My depression also adds another layer of difficulty. It makes everything feel like a huge task, even things that others might see as simple. So, the idea of hosting 8 people multiple times a month feels nearly impossible to me. My husband, however, thinks I'm overreacting. He keeps reminding me that his sister and her family are the only close relatives we have nearby, and he feels it's important to maintain that connection. I completely understand where he's coming from, and I do want him to have a strong relationship with his sister and her family. But at the same time, I just can't see myself hosting them so frequently when it causes me so much stress and anxiety. To make matters more complicated, my brother-in-law has mentioned to my husband that they would like to visit more often, but feel like they can't because of me. This makes me feel even more guilty, as if I'm somehow preventing my husband from enjoying time with his family. But in my mind, the idea of popping over to someone's house with a group of 8 people is a bit much. I also worry because one or more of their children is often sick, and I'm just not comfortable exposing our baby or myself to that risk if it can be avoided. This whole situation has led to some tension between my husband and me. He, along with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, seem to think I'm being unwelcoming and keeping him from spending more time with his family. I've tried to find a compromise by suggesting that my husband visit them whenever he wants, but he insists that he wants all 3 of us, himself, our daughter, and me, to go together. I've even said I'd prefer going to their house rather than hosting them here, but that suggestion hasn't been well received either. My husband feels that going to their house would mean we'd have to leave early to get home in time for our daughter's bedtime routine, which doesn't solve the problem in his eyes. So, AITA for not wanting to host my sister-in-law and her family more often? I feel torn between wanting to support my husband's relationship with his family and managing my own mental health and well-being. While I understand the importance of family, I also have to consider the impact these gatherings have on my anxiety and stress levels. I'm just not sure how to strike the right balance.